And well, I was about to say we're going to be recording tonight, so if you need to rewatch anything, we'll have this posted up on our LAIS website. But that's what we're all doing here tonight. We're representing our Los Angeles Independent School Consortium, and LAIS. This is a group of over 50 schools here in Los Angeles, independent schools who try to work together to help families learn more about independent schools. As you've probably seen if you've looked at schools at all in Los Angeles, there are a huge range of different types of schools. And while we're not going to be able to cover every school's exact process tonight, our aim is to help you understand a little more about independent schools in general and the roadmap of applying to one of these schools and what that process looks like. So if we can switch to the next slide, you'll see some of the things we're going to talk about tonight. One first is, what is an independent school? For me, I grew up in a small town that only had one school that was available. So even knowing what an independent school is sometimes is a good first step. The next, we'll get into why you might choose an independent school, how you can afford an independent school tuition, and then, as I mentioned, the roadmap and next steps that if you are interested in applying, that you can start with. And then at the end, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A too. So feel free to drop any questions you have in the Q&A box down there, and we can answer those at the end. So why don't we hop into our first section? What is an independent school?
Thank you, Brad. So when you're learning about schools, there are so many different terms that are being spread around. And so our hope is to give you a little bit of, shed a little light on some of these terms that are maybe, out there the most. When we start to think about schools, some of the two biggest buckets we think about are public schools and private schools. So public schools include schools like magnet schools, charter schools, and your neighborhood school that you're zoned for. Some of these schools, including magnet and charter, can rely on a lottery system for enrollment and a separate application process. Oftentimes magnet schools also require a certain kind of point system that helps to determine a family or a child's eligibility to join that school. Private schools are in a different kind of a bucket. They include schools like parochial schools, which typically have a religious affiliation, and they're financially supported or subsidized through a church or religious institution. You have for-profit schools, meaning that the tuition dollars that are received will go into the school and the running of the school, but it also is owned by typically kind of a business operation or some kind of independent family who is deriving a profit from that particular school. Third one is non-for-profit schools, also known as independent schools, and that's really what we're focusing on today. Independent schools have an application process that's really based on merit and match. In independent schools, you'll hear us, as you go through this process, talking a lot about our mission statements. Mission statements describe a school's founding and its purpose. And it's really the what's and the whys behind every decision that is made within the walls of that school. There's a lot of freedom and flexibility that come with being in an independent school. We are accredited, but we're accredited by a different organization than maybe a public school or a charter school or a magnet school. So for us, we're accredited by the California Association of Independent Schools. It does a thorough review every few years, really from top to bottom, to make sure that what we're offering parents is really in line with the expectations of what schools like ours should be doing. We also report to a board of trustees. So while the structure of the school is that we'll have teachers and administrators and staff, we'll also have a head of school, and above that head of school will be the board of trustees. Now, the board of trustees are really there to ensure that the general operations of the school follow that school's mission statement. They're not so much involved in the nitty-gritty of carpool or drop-off or kind of those smaller decisions, but really from an 80,000-foot level, is the school doing what it's committed to doing through its mission statement? Board of trustees are often made up of current parents, former teachers, and other educators here in Los Angeles. When I think about mission statements, they're my favorite part of learning about a school. Mission statements can be kind of short little nuggets and actual statements. They could be paragraphs that are a little bit juicier, or they could even have been simplified down to a few key words. But when I talk to families about a school's mission statement, I really like to think about your job as parents is finding a school whose mission statement matches that of your family. As a family, you have your own values and beliefs and things that you strive for that help to make your everyday decisions. And so you want to find a school whose mission statement really matches what you're doing at home, because that will help to create this really lovely connection for your child between their home life and their school life. And with that, I throw it on to, I can't remember who's next.
It's me. Thanks,
Go
Kate.
for it.
I feel like I have the easiest slide here. A lot of because what Kate said, but why should you choose an independent school? Well, I mean, there's a lot of really wonderful reasons. And I'm going to talk about a few of them, and I'm sure you're going to have a few of your own that you've heard of. It's not just for independent schools. It's not just about academic growth. It's about personal growth. It's about the whole child, right? So their educational programs often include really incorporating the social emotional well-being, the development of values. If they're at a religious independent school, there might be a religious connection or a community affiliation with that. So there's a lot of really focused attention to your specific child. Sometimes bigger systems maybe focus on a group as a whole, but independent schools, because of smaller class sizes, programs tailored to the individual abilities and strengths, more time dedicated really to connecting and nurturing that teacher-student relationship, because we have the ability to really hone those opportunities, we really can make sure that we are speaking to each individual child. And that's really what makes independent schools special. We also really have many independent schools have diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging directors, or people working in that field to make sure that that students are exposed to a diverse student body and faculty. There's a real commitment to equal opportunity, as well as a culture of inclusion and belonging, and so it really speaks to a variety of socioeconomic backgrounds, racial backgrounds, family structures, etc. There's also the quality of teaching, because we're not beholden to a large conglomerate, right? There's freedom in the slide that Kate was mentioning, and so we have a lot of freedom to really tailor our curricular experience to our mission and to our community and to our students. So the quality of teaching, the quality of teachers is really heightened, I think, in independent schools, and the pace at which things can move a lot faster and really help accelerate students that are really, working at a higher level of things, and can really reach them and meet them where they're at and push them to go even further, or students that are struggling maybe a little bit and really connecting them and helping them kind of guide them along the way. The other really beautiful thing is that it's really community minded. So, when you look at independent schools, you're not just choosing a space for your child, you're choosing a space for you as well. You're choosing often places of similar values and structures to what you believe and how you feel. Your village, it's another extension of your familial village, and so there's a lot of connection to community and pride, and I'm thinking of other words that mean that, but you get the idea. There's also a lot of opportunity being in an independent school, so it really caters to special interests and abilities. So, you can really find an independent school that really is connected to who your kid is. If your kid is an artist, there are independent schools that really focus on that. If your kid is an athlete, there are schools that really focus on that. If your kid is into STEAM or science, we have schools that really have healthy, developed opportunities. So you can find the exact fit instead of kind of a one size fits all situation. So I'm going to hand it over to Christina, I think.
My turn. Well, thank you, Trisha. Oh, wait. No, I think we're kicking it to Kate.
Back to me. I'll take it. Thank you. Thanks, Trisha. So now that you have learned about independent schools, you've decided that that's the direction you want to go in for your family. And then you get to the page that talks about tuition and you catch your breath a little bit. There is a big price tag that is associated with independent schools, but fear not, because a big part of independent schools and thinking about that diverse community that Trisha was talking about, we're not just talking about diversity in terms of racial and ethnic diversity or familial structure. We're also talking about socioeconomic diversity. Los Angeles is an expensive city to live in. As schools, we really want families to be here who are the right fits for our school and for our community that builds that strong community of like-minded people that Trisha was just talking about. And with that, we also have the goal of having representing that lovely cross-section in terms of socioeconomic diversity of our lovely city of Los Angeles. And so when you are exploring your options and you get to that point of seeing the tuitions and you're starting to calculate what that means per a month, fear not. We don't want you to be intimidated. We want you to reach out to our offices to talk about what the options look like when it comes to applying for financial aid. Tuition assistance is available at all of our schools, but our processes are all going to be a little bit different. So it's really important that you spend that time on the school's website, talking to whoever is the person who's managing the financial assistance process at that school, to understand the nuances of it. Our jobs truly are to be a resource to your family. So please do not be shy to use us in whatever way makes sense for your family. So now when you're thinking about financial aid, and we are thinking about it as schools, we're not just thinking about that actual tuition dollar, because there's much more that goes into it, right? The goal of having a school that has a broad range of financial socioeconomic backgrounds means that everybody is having equity in the process and having an equal opportunity to participate in all parts of school life. So whether it's tickets for party book or maybe different sports fees, or sometimes even money towards lunch, there's lots of different ways that schools are creative in providing additional funding that goes above and beyond just that pure price tag of tuition, because there are going to be additional fees throughout this. Again, every school is going to handle it a little bit differently. So just know that as you're going into it. It's a great question to ask in terms of what kinds of things are included in that. Financial aid awards will come out at the same time as your admissions notification. So you'll get typically an email telling you the good news, or you'll log onto the website and find out the good news from a school. And there'll be a separate process or an email typically that will tell you what your financial aid award is. So you have the full information and you can make an informed decision that's best for your family at that point. In terms of the actual process that leads up to all that good news and that information, again, every school is going to be a little bit different, but there's 4 main organizations that help to support independent schools and families. We partner together to determine the awards for each family. You may have already heard about these. SSS, TADS, FAST, and Clarity are the 4 major organizations. And for families, it's really kind of a clearinghouse. So you upload your information. It could be, typically it's your most recent tax return. It might be a most recent paycheck. It's also information about not just your income, but kind of those set expenses, right? So your rent or your mortgage or your car payments or your insurance payments. So we look for all that information. Now, none of us are, as schools, are in the financial situation to support your yachts or your expensive car collection, but we do want to make sure that families can still have a quality of life that's important to them. So that's, that typically, it's that vacation over the summer to see the grandparents, or, it's the dinners out that help to bond your family and set those traditions. So that is important to us. So if there's ever just a question at all in your mind, as schools, we do encourage you to reach out to the financial aid office and to consider submitting an application. I know what I wanted to say. Hot tip. This is my favorite thing of all. So in most of these processes, they'll give you an option to submit a supplemental letter. I always think that that is the most underutilized part of a financial aid application. A supplemental letter gives you a chance to communicate with the financial aid office and just explain some of the nuances about your finances. Nobody's finances are so, cut and dry. There's always a little bit more. So being able to explain that in a letter, explain about maybe some anticipated expenses that are coming up, like I have 2 boys, we've just started braces and it is expensive. Like that is a great place to say, my son's teeth aren't growing and we anticipate some really expensive dental procedures coming up, and that's going to affect us just a little bit with our finances. So anything like that just helps to give us more information about your family and help to make it to, work together with financial aid office to make a decision that feels right for your families. I think that's it. Was there anything else? This is so nuanced, and we could probably talk about it forever. And Trisha, Christina, and Brad, if there's anything you want to say now, or maybe we could add it to the Q&A.
Yeah, you got a big chunk of it covered. I think we can
Okay.
answer specific
Great.
questions in the Q&A, but good job, Kate.
Thanks.
Awesome. So thank you, Kate. All right, so your roadmap ahead. Now that you have a better sense of what independent schools are, how do you get started? First and foremost, I know this process can seem daunting, but we in the admission offices are truly here to guide you. So always keep that in mind. But truly your best place to start is to check in with your family, specifically your child, and really check in and reflect on what your family values are, as well as what you're looking for in a school in general. And from there, start looking at school websites. That's your best place to begin researching. And if you see the little QR code, it'll link you to our Los Angeles Independent Schools .org website, which is a great resource that has all of our Los Angeles Independent School that are part of the consortium. They're all listed there as well as linked, and there's a great filter there. So you can filter by all of our diverse options, which are K through 12, K through 6, K through 8, maybe pre-K is there, religious based, all gender, single gender. There's just many options there. So I highly encourage you, keep your mind open and explore as many options as possible to not limit yourself. Yes, this process can be competitive, but the best advice we can give you is just keep as many options open as possible. And when you're on these websites, really dive into what these schools are offering in terms of academic enrichment programs. Do they have transportation? Given that we are in LA, it's kind of a beast. So transportation is important, geography is important, but really finding out what their programs are all about and really dive into their mission and values, because we're all very unique in what we want to stand in our communities. So we want it to be hopefully aligned with your family. So from there, once you're getting a feel of the types of schools you're interested in, start submitting inquiry forms. So each website will have their admission office called out. So make sure you click on that tab. Typically the inquiry form is there, should be short and sweet. And it really will ask you your biographical information, your child's name, the school they're attending, and what grade you're applying for. And from there, once you submit, you're going to be part of the school's databases, and then you'll be able to apply and register for campus tours or admission events, community events, or really just any event that gets you on campus to get to a sense of their school community. And there might be virtual tours on campuses. There might be YouTube videos. Check it all out. It'll give you a great sense of our school cultures and communities. And check out their social media. That's really a great way to kind of get a glimpse of the day-to-day and just find out what our schools are all about. Yeah, visiting is your best bet. But Keep in mind, we are in December, schools are slowing down and what they're offering in terms of events, but what keeps going and keeps rolling is our campus tour. So I highly suggest submitting those inquiry forms and at minimum sign up for a campus tour, and hopefully maybe there are additional events happening. So sign up for as much as you can. And from there, start your application process. So some schools will have you create a portal online, some will, your inquiry form will create that portal. But what you'll need to be looking at is the checklist. The checklist will just guide you through every step of the process and what's required from your family. So each school varies, but for the most part, we require the application, which is typically a parent and student questionnaire, as well as they'll ask about your student interests, activities, and the students will have to submit a few essays. And from there, we also require 3 recommendation forms, and all of our LAIS schools require the same form. So at least we'll give your teachers a break. We want them to write some really nice ones on your behalf, and less work for them, the better. But we require 3, one from your administrator, whether it's your head of school or principal, as well as a current math teacher and a current English teacher. And if you're in lower school, that's K through 5th grade typically, you may have the same teachers. I would just check in with your school that you're applying for. Mostly they'll tell you either submit the same form twice or send an email with additional context for that specific subject. And yet from there, every school again varies. We require interviews with parents and students, as well as screening or assessments. Some require writing supplements, some require the big testing, the ISEE or the SSAT. Some don't require it at all, and some make it optional. So really, when you're doing your research and your deep dive in the admission websites, within the school websites, really take a look, because we also have varying deadlines when it comes to financial assistance. So typically for LAIS, and I know Trisha's going to get into deadlines and all that, but just keep in mind, we all vary a little bit here and there. Just stay on top of your emails. Oh, and that's my hot tip. I'm going to take Kate's line. My hot tip is, before you even submit inquiry forms, if you haven't yet done it, I suggest creating one email address that your entire family could share, as well as your child that's applying. That way everyone's on the same page, and save yourself some sanity. Super helpful. So yeah, just once those emails and those inquiry forms are in, we'll keep you on track. We'll send a ton of reminder emails. We'll be bugging you electronically. So just stay on top of it. And when in doubt, if you're ever feeling behind or just feeling overwhelmed by the process, send us an email, give us a call, and we'll get you right back on track. And let's see, Trisha, do you want me to kick it back to you? If not,
Oh, yes, I do. Yeah, and so so I'm just going to talk quickly about deadlines before we move on to Q&A. Thank you, Hadley. Because we're all in the majority of the schools that Brad was talking about initially, we're all in the same consortium. We've agreed to a set deadline date of March 8th. So all schools in the consortium will be sending out their admission decision on March 8th. And you have about a week to get back to them with your decision. So you have to let everybody know by March 15th. That's the week later, March 15th. And so that gives you kind of a week to assess your different options and maybe like talk to your friends or kind of revisit all the materials between then and now. Generally, schools are not allowed to reach out to you during that time, but you can definitely reach out to them. Some schools have a rolling admission process. Like I'm at a school that has a rolling admissions process. So while we stick to the March 8th deadline for that first group of students, we also accept throughout the year based on space availability as well. And so some schools will also be open to that. So check in with them because, you know, if you're looking for a mid-year, or you move and you want to see if there's space, it's possible to truncate that process after or before the March 8th deadline.
All right, wonderful. So we've been getting some questions in the Q&A, and I know we had some submitted beforehand, so we can hop into these. Feel free to add more as we go if you have questions for any of us. But one that came in while we were on the last slide talking about the application process was about applying for preschool, and how you know, a school that has a preschool or even a kindergarten, how that process might be different than if you're applying for high school. Does anyone want to answer that?
Sorry, a school that has a preschool, how it's different preschool than applying for high school?
Yes, yeah. I think it was, you know, recommendation letters and things like that are going to look different for younger kids.
So we don't have a preschool, but we do have a kindergarten. So, which is almost a preschool. So for us, there is one form, it's the LAIS form, and I think it's like 3 pages, and that is typically filled out by your preschool director and your child's current teacher or head teacher. And it's really a checklist of skills-based, you know, whether or not it's something they're doing consistently or most of the time, and just, you know, kind of a little bit of maturity, an indication of maturity and where they are vis-a-vis the rest of the class and the expectations for their age. And then there's a small narrative portion. So that's something that is incredibly helpful for us as the admissions office to see, because they don't really have homeroom teachers in the same way, or separate teachers for math or for English. That's the form that is used by all of us to gain the most information. Some schools have different requirements about that letter from the community, sort of that letter of recommendation. So I would check each school's website to see whether or not they are accepting them. Are they encouraged? And if you're not sure, just call and ask.
Yeah, and I will chime in a little bit. I have had preschool under my purview in the past, and again, it differs a little bit per school. Generally, they don't have such an extensive admission process. Most schools like to meet the student, might like to interview the parents or guardians, and so that's generally part of it, as well as like the checklist kind of questionnaire things that Kate was mentioning. But there's not a lot of the necessarily the process. It's more about space availability, but they don't necessarily follow the same deadlines as the March 8th one like we do, because they have different cutoffs for age groupings than elementary, middle, and high school do.
The preschoolers don't have to write essays either. That is,
they do have to write essays. Definitely get them trained right now.
Oh, and one thing about recommendations, the LAIS ones that we all share, the teachers and administrators aren't writing full letters. It's truly a form with checkoff, and they can provide additional context. So I want to put that out.
Good. To that point, there was a question, you know, if you apply to a school and you have a teacher write a recommendation, you don't get in, do you need to have a new recommendation the following year? I think I can answer that one pretty quickly, is that we do ask for the recommendation from a current teacher they have, just because they're the ones that know where they are in their journey, and kids can change so much from year to year, especially when they're young, that it's always helpful to get an up-to-date perspective on where your child is.
Absolutely.
Okay, this is a good one about financial aid. This is a question I've gotten a lot too, is does a school decide on a child for admission first and then decide on financial aid? Are all the children considered at once? Are financial aid applicants considered separately? How does seeking financial aid help or hurt a child's chances at admission?
I can answer, but I know Christina wants to as well. She's jumping at the screen. So some schools to be in the LAIS consortium and in to be in independent schools in general. It's a needs blind process. So so the admissions process is separate from the financial aid process. Different people work on the aid than work on the admissions. So if the admissions team says, yes, we're accepting this kid, then they will talk to the business office or the finance team or whomever is doing the financial aid and say, we're accepting this child. Did they qualify? Because we send out the letters at the same time, and maybe advocate for those kids. But generally you're not, you don't cross that, because it doesn't have anything to do, it will not hurt your child's chance for admission, or change the admission decision, their financial aid status. Does anyone want to add anything to that?
Great.
Yeah, I would just add to along those lines that this process is confidential, and so there's probably a very the financial aid application process is confidential. So there's probably very few people on campus that even know which students apply for aid. And once you're accepted into a school, it's also kept confidential. So your child's teachers or friends, or, it would never be any different as to any other students. So it's usually just a couple people in the business office that that manage that. And so it's not something that's, you're separated out in any way from anyone else at the school.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, next we had another financial aid question. Once you've been awarded a scholarship or financial aid, is it automatically rolled over to the next school year, or do you have to do the process over again each year?
Go ahead, Christina.
Are you
No,
sure?
you talk, Christina. Go for it.
All right, so you don't need to reapply every year, but you will need to update your application every year. So essentially you'll be uploading either your new tax returns or your W-2, whatever, depending on the timeline. I know every school has a re-enrollment process a bit differently. Our school will be doing it in January. So not all W-2s will be out by then, but we would want your most recent tax returns, because we want to see, let's say you hit the lottery, you make more money one year, or if you make less one year, or you've been laid off, or financial structures in your family have changed, we want to make sure to meet your need to keep you and your child in our school community. So yeah, go for it, Kate, if you want to add.
No, that's great. I mean, I do think, right, it's important to know that it's not an automatic process, that you really do have to go through that and submit your updated information. And as long as things haven't changed dramatically for your family, you can expect that along with the cost of tuition increase, that your award will be increased to match that too. So the overall percentage of what you're paying most likely will stay around the same.
And in addition to that, just so you know, like once you're in a school community, they really want to keep you there and want to make sure that you can stay there. So, if you're really struggling, talk to them and work with them, because they definitely want to make sure that it's continues to be a good fit for your child and your family.
Amazing. Okay. There were a couple that were submitted ahead of time. One was, are there scholarships that are available specifically for African-American students? And I think we could expand that out to, or, scholarships for specific groups of students.
Oh yeah, I could take that one on. So I used to work, we call them CBOs, community-based organizations, and there's 3 that come to mind that are fairly active in LA. So they don't provide scholarships, but they provide a support process to help you and be an advocate for you, especially amongst a group of folks as well, to apply together to these schools. And they really become your kind of educational consultants and counselors for this admission process. So the 3 that come to mind are Private School Access, the Alliance, as well as A Better Chance. They don't provide scholarships, but they will support you in applying for financial assistance. They're able to work with you one-on-one to see how your application's faring, what more information you need to add, what you shouldn't add. So they will really support you through that process. these organizations, once they go through the process and they get accepted and enrolled in independent schools, they typically do provide scholarships once they're applying for college or once they get accepted. So, we want you to be part of school communities, but even if you're coming from a community-based organization, stay active, because you may be getting scholarship money, but more importantly, it's a community that will support you through this whole process as just someone to lean on. So yeah, if anyone else wants that.
Yeah, I mean, also depending on the different type of independent school that you apply to, they often also have different kind of merit scholarships. Some religious schools have scholarships based on different types of entrance exams and different things like that. So it's important to look at their affording blah 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 page, or the financial aid and tuition pages of those different places that you're looking at, and see, because sometimes they do have it available. You just have to kind of look a little bit further.
And I thought of 2 additional resources, and the community-based organizations I mentioned, Access, Alliance, and ABC, they're specifically for students of color that identify as students of color. But there are 2 scholarship programs. There's Jack Kent Cook Scholarship for young scholars, as well as the Caroline D. Bradley Scholarship Program. So those are 2 great resources to look into. Their timelines are, I believe, more so for older students, typically need to be in 7th grade or in high school, but those are also 2 great options. Yeah.
Great. And then this is a fun question. Is it common to stay on a wait list for multiple years? I can start by maybe explaining what a wait list is, and then someone else can tell us whether it's common or not. But usually schools will have a set number of students that they can have in a class, or my school, we're capped on the total number of students we can have in the school. So we have limited space each year as far as new students that we're able to bring in. And so oftentimes there are more great students than we have space for at our school. So if I have 50 places in my kindergarten class and there are 60 kids I really think are amazing, we have to make tough decisions sometimes. And so what will happen is we call it at our school a wait pool, other schools call it a wait list. And those would be students that we think could be a great fit at our school, but we just don't have the space for. And the wait pool is kept around so that if someone's plans change, someone gets a job in another state and they're moving and the space opens up, you have those students who you've already gotten to know and already feel like would be a good fit at the school to pull in and fill any space that opens up. Or to roll over to the next year. Maybe we don't have space for you this year, but we'd like to keep you in our wait pool in case there's a change down the road that we can bring you in. So someone else can take it from there as far as whether that would be common to happen several years in a row.
Yeah, I will say, sometimes there's just bubble years. I can think of a few grades for us where they just got a little over enrolled at one point, and we just simply don't have the space. And so that wait list might just mean that we would need 3 children to leave to even consider bringing in a new child for that particular grade. So that might be a good indication that, maybe you could stay in touch with the school, but also start to maybe cast a wider net to see if there might be some other options that you would want to consider for your child, because it might just be, as Brad said, just a question of space, and there's just not going to open up in that particular grade or that particular group that's going through.
Yeah, I think if it's happened a couple of years in a row, it's probably a sign that the school really likes you, but that there's something keeping it. Sometimes that could even be, schools try to keep the gender balance in a grade level, and you have a boy and they really have too many boys in that grade level. So that could be the issue too. So I think, as Kate said, it might be, if it's happening a couple of years in a row, kind of a sign that maybe it's time to cast a wider net.
Well, and this is a great question that came through about the wait list. And I think this is why a lot of schools have moved to the idea of wait pool, because it's not kind of a 1-for-1 in terms of the list piece. Because, to Brad's point, maybe if we're set and we've got our X number of girls and X number of boys that we're offering a spot to for that kindergarten year, and we didn't get that particular boy, we're probably going to go to a boy in our pool who has, and thinking about all of the pieces that we're looking for. So thinking about gender, personality, strength, sort of who they are as a person, and adding that person to the class. So it's not necessarily like a list format always, which is why a lot of schools have moved towards renaming it a pool, because it really is looking at that group and deciding, okay, we've got this great opportunity. Who do we think is kind of that natural person to take that next step?
Yeah, and if you do get those decisions that go out on March 8th, you'll either hear we're excited you're accepted to the school, we really like you, we're going to have you in a wait pool because we don't have space right now, or sometimes you'll hear, we don't think you're a great fit with the school, or it's just not going to be, we're not going to be able to accept you this year. If you hear that, we're not going to be able to accept you this year, or what you might think of as a denial of your application, those are final decisions. So I know sometimes there's the tendency to want to say like, oh, but here's why you made the wrong choice. And that comes from such a good place of advocating for your child. But those kinds of decisions are final. So that they're not going to see a school that says, oh, actually, you're right. We'll accept you. That's time to, just take that as a sign that, there's another school that's going to be a better fit for you. But if you do get that letter that you're going to be part of a wait pool, it would be appropriate to reach out to the school and just reiterate that you are, excited to take the spot in the wait pool, and that you are still interested in attending the school, just so you can communicate that with the admission director or someone on the admission team, so they know if that spot does open up that you're excited and willing to take it if it becomes available. Yeah. Okay, I think we exhausted all of our questions. Any other hot tips or anything that someone is holding on to that they want to get out there?
I thought of one. If you're completely new to this process, I would say you're almost starting a year in advance. So you would start, let's say you want to apply for 6th grade at an independent school. You'll want to begin the fall of your 5th grade year, if that helps. So always think about it in a year in advance.
And I'll also add that there are really wonderful bus options and things, but the process can feel a little overwhelming because there are a lot of really great schools out there. And so it's hard to differentiate sometimes. And it's easy to get caught up in feeling stressed and overwhelmed about the whole process. So just be gentle with yourself and know that there is a right fit for your child. And maybe to start the process, maybe look geographically near you first and then move out from there, because then you can kind of narrow it down. Again, maybe starting a little bit earlier, that will give you some time and space to really see what kind of communities you connect with the most and what kind of missions really speak to you.
And I will say you've now met 4 admissions directors here in Los Angeles, and we are people who care about our jobs in the schools and the families that we meet with. And so know that you are in good hands, and regardless of the outcome for your family, is that, we have all enjoyed, I think we genuinely enjoy meeting pretty much everybody, every single person, and definitely every child that we meet. Whether or not it ends up as a right fit for a family, just know that the care and attention that we showed you tonight is also just a little glimpse into what happens in our everyday world. And we hope that you do reach out to the admissions people at whatever school you apply to, because we truly are here to help and support you through this process.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, if we can go to the next slide, we'll get the LAIS website link up there. Again, it's LosAngelesIndependentSchools.org. There's some great resources on there. There's actually a webinar that we did a couple weeks ago on the nitty-gritty of financial aid. We had Alyssa Evans on, who's an expert at explaining kind of how to start that process and what information to include and how to navigate it. There's also, as Christina said, some great resources as far as narrowing down different schools that you might be interested in. And there's a contact form on there too. So if you have specific questions, or if you want to get get in touch with one of us, you can always do that through there. But thanks so much for taking the time to join us this evening. Thank you so much to Kate and Christina and Trisha for your wonderful insights into the world of independent schools. And yeah, hopefully we will see you on one of our tours or on one of our campuses in the near future. Thanks so much.
Guys.